Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirviseshasha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're continuing our reading of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. We are reading Bhagavad Gita we are on chapter 2, text 28. No, text 29. We finished text 28 last week. So, Sheetal, would you like to read?
Yes.
Please read the Sanskrit.
Ascharyavat just a minute, I'm not able to. Okay. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidena ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyah ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti shrutva vinam vedana chaiva kaschid.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing. And some hear of him as amazing. While others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So Krishna is continuing to speak about the soul, the nature of the soul. Since Gitopanishad is largely based on the principles of the Upanishads, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.7. Shavanyapi bahubhir yona labhyaha shanvato api bahavo yamna vidyuhu ascharyo vakta kushalo asya labdha ascharyo asya janata kushalana kushalanushitaha. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. Men with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot understand the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge, who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe. So in the Katha Upanishad, it is said that the soul, which is tiny, we are 1/10,000 times the tip of a hair. So we take a tip of a hair, we cut it into 10,000 pieces. That is the size of us. We are the atomic soul. And so this same soul, we are all individual souls, of course. So there is a soul in the body of a huge whale. And also there is a soul within the body of a huge elephant. And also there is a soul within the body of these tiny germs, microbes, which we can't even see. And it's the size of the soul is the same. We are all individual, they're all different souls, but the size is the same. So isn't it amazing that a tiny, tiny soul, 1/10,000 the tip of a hair, is inside the soul of a gigantic whale, you know, and that's what's making the whale move, the elephant move. Same, we are also tiny, we are also 1/10,000 tip of a hair. We are inside this human body. So owing to gross material conception of things, most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. So men look at the soul proper as wonderful, either by constitution or by description. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in subject matters for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self-understanding, all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. So we can see how many of us are actually interested to understand what is the truth. Most of us will say, oh, you want to speak of Bhagavad Gita, or you want to do Kirtan. Well, I'm busy. I have to go here and I have to do this and I have to do that. I have so many things to do. You know, we are not interested nowadays to understand what's the truth. There's very few people out of the 7 billion human beings on this earth. How many are actually interested in understanding what's the truth? Who am I and who's God and what's my relationship with me? How many of us are actually reading Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, chanting the holy name? Most of us, we are so engrossed in sense gratification. We want to get more and more knowledge, how we can enjoy more and more with the senses. How can I see more things which are going to give me pleasure? How can I hear more gossip or more things which I think will give me pleasure? But in fact, we have seen that by engaging in sense gratification, after we engage in sense gratification, suppose we speak on the phone or anyway, we speak to somebody, gossip about somebody or speak about some entertainer or speak about some favorite popular person. How much will we speak about that person? 1 hour, 2 hours. After that, we say, oh, enough. I don't want to speak about this anymore. You know, I spoke so much. And then we ourselves feel so restless in the heart. Oh my God, I wasted so much time. What did I do? But we know when we are hearing the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, the heart feels happy. We feel blissful after we've read. We see that Sukadev Goswami, he spoke for 7 days without stopping. And Parikshit Maharaj heard 7 days Bhagavatam without stopping, without sleeping, eating. So we can see, actually we think that sense gratification is going to make us happy. But sense gratification, in fact, does not make us happy. So, because happiness is with the soul. It's only in the soul that we can feel, the soul can feel happiness. But the senses, they're just gross dead matter. They don't have the capability of feeling happy. Sure, we'll feel some satisfaction of the senses, but that is also so limited. How much can we eat at one time? How much can we sleep at one time? How much can we talk? It's so limited. So perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. We are always thinking, the more I enjoy my life, right now I'm not enjoying, but if I do more and more sense gratification, if I have more money, then I can maybe buy this or that. I can go here or there. I can eat this or that, and that will make me happy. But we have had experience that no, it doesn't make us happy. It does not. Some people who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes, owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance of the super soul and the atomic soul as one without distinction of magnitude. So this very commonly happens because there are some of us who are interested in finding out what's the soul, what's the nature of the soul, but then we get misguided by people who tell us, oh, there is no difference between Paramatma and you. You are Paramatma. Paramatma is, everything is one. Everything is one big blob of light. But that is not correct. Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna specifically says we are individual souls. We have always been individual souls, and we will continue to remain individual souls. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the position of the supersoul, the atomic soul, their respective functions, and the relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from the knowledge of the soul and who is able to describe the position of the soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. So here Prabhupada is telling us, how can we make our life successful? Otherwise, we are just thinking, what's the aim of life? Actually, human life, Bhagavatam says, Vedanta Sutra says, that human life begins with the inquiry, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, that now we have gotten this human form of life. Let us inquire into the truth. That is the beginning of human life. Till the time we don't make this inquiry, what is the truth? Who am I and who is God? We are not even on the position of human beings. Then we are just behaving on the platform of animals, which is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Some of us might not like to hear it, but it is a fact. Because the human, what is the difference between the human body and the animal body is the human beings are given this intelligence to make this inquiry that who am I and who is God? What is my relationship with God? How can I be situated in that relationship? And Bhagavad Gita tells us that we are the tiny parts and parcels of Krishna, eternal loving tiny parts and parcels of Krishna, and that Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. We have a loving relationship with him, and we can be situated in our relationship with him when we begin by hearing and chanting, hearing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, hearing from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and speaking from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of the Bhagavad Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones, before one is able to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna can, however, be known as such by the causeless mercy of the pure devotee and by no other way. So it's the devotees who are so kind, they're compassionate. Lord Chaitanya came specifically for this purpose. He said, Yare dekha tare kaha Krishna upadesh. Anyone you see, wherever you go, tell them about Krishna. Why? Because we are all suffering here. And what is our suffering? Is that we are separated from Krishna. That is our true suffering. The soul can be happy only when we are connected back with Krishna, only when we are situated in our relationship with Krishna. And that's the reason when we are doing bhakti, when we are hearing and chanting about Krishna, we feel happy, we feel joyful because we are connected to Krishna in that way. And so because of the good fortune of Srila Prabhupada, we are able to read the Bhagavad Gita as it is in this English language, and it's translated in so many, all the major languages of the world. So we should also try to spread this mercy to others, inform others about Krishna, about the truth. Is it okay? Are there any questions or comments? If no, then we can go on to the next verse. Text 30. Dehi nityam avadyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani na tvam sochitam arhasi. O descendant of Bharat, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any living being. The Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on the immutable spirit soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. So here Krishna is saying very clearly that we are not the body. It's the body that is gone. We have to give it up. The body cannot last forever. It might last for 100 years at most in this Kali Yuga on an average, but it can't go beyond that. Well, there may be some few people. How many people would live beyond 100? Very few handful of people. Majority of the people don't even live up to 100. So the body is temporary. But we are the soul. We are not temporary. We are eternal. And we can always realize this. This is the reason that we always feel we are eternal. We never feel ourselves as becoming old. Even though we are some of us in an older body now, we still feel we are young. We feel, I feel as if when I was a person of 16 years old. That is the evidence that we are the soul, not the body. So therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher, Bhishma and Drona, will die in battle. On the authority of Sri Krishna, one has to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such a thing as a soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity resulting from the interaction of chemicals. So some people feel that, that there is no soul. It's just at some point in the evolution, some chemicals combined and boom, life was created. But in our experience, we have never seen such a thing happen. We have never seen that you put some chemicals together and suddenly a living being is going to be coming out of it. So the theory that chemicals can create a human being is false, because if it was true, then there should be proof of it. Life comes only from life. Life does not come from matter. So here we are hearing from the highest authority, from Sri Krishna, who is the speaker of the Vedas. He's the original speaker of the Vedas. And he is saying that we are not the body, we are the soul. So though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged. But at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. So here Krishna is saying that he's telling Arjuna that the grandfather and teacher that you're feeling sad about, they are not the body, they are the soul. They will continue to live. It's not that by you doing your duty of a Kshatriya and fighting in the war, that you're actually killing them. No, it's just that they're going to give up the body. They will continue to live in another body. But that does not mean that we pick up guns and start shooting everyone. No, this war, which was happening, a Kurukshetra war, was a religious war. Arjuna is a Kshatriya. It is his duty to fight. And so we can use this instruction of Krishna to Arjuna for ourselves, that Krishna is telling Arjuna, do not give up your duty out of weakness of the heart. Similarly, we also, whatever position we are in, we should not give up our duties. Whatever duties we have, we should do them faithfully, dutifully, with the aim to please Krishna, that my dear Krishna, I'm doing my duty for your pleasure. Is that okay? So then reading on text 31. Would anybody like to read the Sanskrit? Sheetal, would you like to read it?
Yeah, I can read.
Okay.
Swadharmam api chavekshya na vikampentum arhasi dharmyadhi yuddha shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate.
Okay. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. Out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order, for the matter of good administration is called Kshatriya. Shat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya. Rayate, to give protection. Oh, wow. Haribol? Okay, now it seems all right. So the Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyas or renunciation. So, Kshatriyas, they could do the killing. Now in this Kali Yuga, we do not have any true Kshatriyas. Here now, Kshatriya means he's going to protect, not that the king sends his army to the battlefield and he himself is sitting in the palace. No, he would be out on the battlefield in front, leading the soldiers to protect his citizens. But now we see that the heads of the government, they don't go to the battle. They just let the poor soldiers go. So the Varna Sharma system in this Kali Yuga is not existing because the way the society has moved, we see that it is not there anymore. So non-violence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated, ahaveshu mitho anyonyam jigham shanto mahishitaha yuddhamana param shaktya swargam yanti aparan mukhaha yagneshu pashavo brahman hanyante satatam dvijahe samskritaha kila mantrescha te api swargam avapnuvan. In the battlefield, a king or Kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death, as the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. So if the Kshatriya is fighting based on religious principles, not just out of anger or greed or envy or false ego, but if it's based on religious principle, like the Mahabharata war, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to fight because this is a religious war. It's a dharma yuddha. It's on the dharma kshetra, on the religious battlefield. It's not happening in any city where all the poor civilians are in fact being hurt. No, it's happening in a place which is far away from the city, a special battlefield, and it's a religious war. So when the king dies fighting in a religious war, he attains the heavenly kingdom because he's doing his duty. So that's his reward for doing his duty. He gets a higher body in his next life. And in earlier ages, the animals would be sacrificed. There would be, for example, the Ashwamedha Yagya, the horse sacrifice. So that was not meant to just kill the animal and to eat it or to kill the animal and only out of envy. No, and those animals were not killed brutally like in a slaughterhouse. No, they were killed by mantras. And why? Because the animal would get immediately a newer body. If it's a horse, so it's an old horse, immediately it'll get the body of a new horse. So it's better for the animal. It's getting a younger body, or it would get a human body. So anyway, the animal would be benefited. And then the Brahmanas who are performing these sacrifices also would be benefited. So it was not, this animals were not sacrificed to eat them. Now we can see in Kali Yuga that, and that's the reason now in Kali Yuga, Any form of animal sacrifice is totally prohibited. It's totally prohibited that one cannot perform religious sacrifices of killing animals. So whatever animal slaughter is going on, it's all exploitation of the poor animals. It's the poor animals, they can't speak. And so some of us are just taking advantage of them. And it is a grossly sinful act, taking the lives of someone. We are not able to give life to even one person, then we have no right to take anyone's life. So the animal gets sacrificed, gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another. And the Kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attain the heavenly planets, as do the Brahmanas, who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are two kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord. This will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnashrama Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashrama Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body ordained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. So before, society was so arranged, the Varnashrama Dharma was so arranged that each and every individual was trained to uplift the consciousness that we are not here to stay forever, that whatever we see is a property of God, and that the human life is specifically meant to terminate our material existence, to put an end to cycle of birth and death. That was the aim of Varnashrama. While everybody would be engaged in their own specific duty, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, but the aim of society was to put an end to our material existence, that our next body we take should be a spiritual body. We can see now in Kali Yuga, the society has been degraded by following, we have given up our Vedic culture and we are trying to follow the modern civilization in which there is no proper education to teach us who are we actually, that we are not the body. We are only taught us to, in fact, do more grossly sinful activities. We are taught, in fact, to do more sense gratification. And I admire those people in society nowadays, but we are being grossly misled. That is not the aim of human life. Human life for us is to develop our understanding, our relationship with Krishna, our swadharma. Our swadharma is bhakti, to engage in devotional service to the Lord, to hear and chant his names and glories. Is that okay? Any comments or questions?
No, I think
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So then we can go to the next one. Text 32. Would anybody like to read the Sanskrit? Anyway, I'll read it. Yadrichaya chopapannam swargadvaram apavratam sukhina kshatriya partha labhante yuddham idrasham. O Partha, Happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. As supreme teacher of the world, Lord Krishna condemns the attitude of Arjuna, who said, I do not find any good in this fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell. Such statements by Arjuna were due to ignorance only. He wanted to become non-violent in the discharge of his specific duty. For a Kshatriya to be on the battlefield and to become non-violent is the philosophy of fools. So Krishna is, because Arjuna was telling Krishna, what's going to come out of this war? I don't want to fight. Or rather, I go and stay in the forest. I will renounce the world. So Krishna is telling him, how can you think of that? You're a Kshatriya. You should do your duty. So it helps us that we should not renounce our duties prematurely, just out of weakness of heart. We should continue to doing our duties. At the same time, we should cultivate our spiritual knowledge, cultivate our knowledge of the soul, of our relationship with Krishna. We should continue to hear and chant side by side while we are doing our material duties. Because if we give up our material duties prematurely, we are just going to become a nuisance to society. We all have a certain nature, and till the time we are not totally liberated, that modes of nature will bind us. So we should continue doing our duty, whatever they are, for the pleasure of Krishna. We just have to change that, our center, our focus. So we can say, I'm doing my duty, whatever position I'm doing it for the pleasure of Krishna, because that is what will make Krishna happy, that I do my duty well. And at the same time, you should hear and chant, because that is actually what makes Krishna really happy, being connected with him. Because he's waiting for us to come back eagerly. Krishna does not want us to be here in this material world. So in the Parasara Smriti, or religious codes made by Parasara, the great sage and father of Vyasadeva, it is stated, Kshatriyo hi praja rakshan, shastra pani hi pradandayan, nirjitya parasainyadi, shitim dharmena palayet. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties, and for that reason, he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus with religious principles, he should rule over the world. So we can see that the Kshatriyas were never meant to become sannyasis. They, as long as they are in the position of the king, only after they retire, yes, the kings, the Raja Rishis, what they would do is they would rule the kingdom for a certain time, and they would rule it with keeping Krishna in the center. They would take the advice from the devotees of the Lord of how to run the society. And then when it was time for them to give up, they would retire, hand over the kingdom to their suitable heirs who's gotten proper training, and then the latter part of their life, they would fully dedicate to their spiritual activities. We see like kings like Bharat Maharaj, Rishabdev, they set examples. Bharat Maharaj set an example. He gave up his kingdom to his children, and then he went to engage in his spiritual activities, to do his sadhana. Considering all aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets, whose doors were wide open to him. Fighting would be for his benefit in either case. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to not give up his duty, because when we do our duty by keeping Krishna in center, then that is karma yoga. We are doing for the pleasure of Krishna. Anything we are doing for the pleasure of Krishna. If we are doing an activity which Krishna tells us to do for his pleasure, then that's bhakti yoga. But there is an activity which we like to do, and we say, Krishna, I offer the result to you, then that's karma yoga. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Like Bhakti Yoga, like Krishna tells us to hear and chant the holy name, to read from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. So that is Bhakti Yoga. And then Karma Yoga can be that I like to paint, for example, if somebody likes to paint, and then they paint pictures of Krishna, they paint the temple, you know, then that is Karma Yoga. They like to do something and they're offering the result to Krishna. So that's Karma Yoga, like that. So but well, if you're painting the temple, of course, that's also like Bhakti Yoga, you know, that's also devotional service. But if somebody likes to make money, for example, so then they do their business and then they offer that money to the Krishna conscious activities, that's Karma Yoga, you know. Or like, for example, today I feel, oh, I have a desire to eat a burger. So I cook a burger and I offer it to Krishna. That's Karma Yoga. But if I cook it with the pleasure, oh, Krishna, you will enjoy to eat this burger. Let me cook it for your pleasure. Then that's Bhakti Yoga. You see, there's a difference. You know, how one is for the pleasure of Krishna, we are doing the activity, and one is the activity I like to do, but I offer the result to Krishna. So that's the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So text 33. Athachetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tatha swadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapsyasi. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Arjuna was a famous fighter. He attained fame by fighting many great demigods, including even Lord Shiva. After fighting and defeating Lord Shiva in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord and received as a reward a weapon called Pashupata Ashtra. Pashupata Ashtra. Everyone knew that he was a great warrior. Even Dronacharya gave him benedictions and awarded him the special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher. So he was credited with so many military certificates from many authorities, including his adoptive father Indra, the heavenly king. But if he abandoned the battle, not only would he neglect his specific duty as a Kshatriya, but he would lose all his fame and good name and thus prepare his royal road to hell. In other words, he would go to hell not by fighting, but by withdrawing from battle. So here, Krishna is telling him that I'm encouraging you, do your duty. That is your duty. You are a Kshatriya. So you should do your duty. If you don't do your duty, you will incur sinful reactions. You know, for Arjuna, if he would have not fought, then people would have said, oh, he got scared. They wouldn't think, oh, he's actually a pure devotee of Krishna. So he felt sorry that he's going to kill his grandfather and teacher. So out of family affection, he's not fighting. People would have condemned him. They would have said, oh, he got scared. That's why he didn't fight. You know, people would have said different things. But he would be neglecting his duty. So Krishna is telling, in however troublesome our duty is, we should not neglect it. And so our prime duty in this human form of life is to connect ourselves with Krishna. Our Sanatan Dharma, our Swadharma is actually to hear and chant the holy name. So we should not give up that, chanting and hearing the holy name, just out of weakness of the heart. You know, we should not come that, oh, I'm so tired today, so I'm not going to chant my rounds today. Or today I'm so busy, I went to watch a movie, so I'm not going to read today. No, it is our duty to hear and chant every day. And so we should do it regularly. Regularly, we should not give up this duty. It's our prime duty as human beings to establish our personal relationship with Krishna, our loving relationship with Krishna, which begins by hearing and chanting. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So any questions or comments? Anything to say about what we read today? If no, then we can stop here and we can chant one round of Hare Krishna mantra. Yes? Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Thank you for joining in.